Wow, some pretty gritty stuff going on here. I'm very impressed with all the grit that I've seen. I got to pull this out here, and I can't talk and operate at the same time. Here we go. Um, I've loved grit, that word, for so long. I grew up in a really small town in upstate New York where there's more cows than people, and it was always a kind of a tough environment there. And we always watched, those John Wayne movies and Clint Eastwood and stuff, and I always loved the word grit. And it was so cool when I got the call and you guys had your theme was grit. In fact, there's been, so many famous people. You think about Jim Carrey, one of my favorite actors. Does anybody know the behind the scenes with him? What it took him to become that comedian? His father didn't have a job, and they lived in a van. Not a van down by the river, but they lived in a van, And he was dirt poor, and he never gave up on his goal of going for that comedian. And of course, we've got, J.K. Rowling, and who doesn't love the Harry Potter series? And without her tenacity and perseverance, we wouldn't have that. And you probably might know her story. She was a single mom. She got divorced. She ended up on welfare for a while. Do you know how many times the Harry Potter book was rejected? Anybody know? 12. 12 times, but she kept on going. And another one is Steve Jobs. Definitely had that tenacity, that perseverance. My goodness, his mother, when she was in college, gave him up for adoption. And he was kind of, hurt over that his whole life, but his adoptive parents were wonderful. He was going to college. He ended up quitting college, not because he wasn't motivated, but because he wanted to help his parents not, have that financial burden. So he quit college, and you might know some of his story, obviously Apple, and he kind of mistakenly stumbled into, but with perseverance, Pixar, but you think about all of these people and you think about grit, and I just want to ask you, do you think grit guarantees our success and happiness? That grittiness, that perseverance, that not giving up on anything. Is it going to guarantee our happiness and success? I don't think so either, and I've learned that actually it makes us a little crazy sometimes if we're not careful. Because we'll be running around and we're just go after the goals. And I'll tell you, in fact, I'm going to back up and tell you a little bit about me so that you understand my real passion for grit and a little different spin on what we know as grit. As I said, I grew up in a small town, but a very large family. I was the middle child of 14. Oh yeah, it was like the Crazy Bunch instead of the Brady Bunch, and it was we grew up tough. We really did. Like I can remember that I was probably about 3 or 4 years old, and I remember we were living out in Arizona, and I remember my stepmom telling me to go out and call the kids for dinner, and I was like, Joanne, Jerry, and I'm yelling to them, and I hear them giggling and stuff, and I'm going over to see what they're doing, and all of a sudden, bam, a rock falls on my head. Yeah, they thought it was really funny to put this rock on a post and just, it falls down on my head, and meanwhile, there's blood gushing out, and my stepmother comes running out, and she grabs me up, and I'm more afraid of the peroxide than what she's about to do next. She shaves my head and stitches my head up. Yeah. I'm not exaggerating when I say we grew up tough. We didn't have a lot of money. We grew up tough. I can remember some of the perseverance that my dad used to teach us. He would, for example, he offered me he wanted his backhoe degreased. He had a case backhoe, a great big backhoe, and so he offered me he put little tags for so many quarters on each piece of the backhoe to be degreased. Now I was in 3rd or 4th grade. This was just so overwhelming, and I remember going, wow, this is going to take me forever. But then he said, if you get it all done, I'm going to triple what you make. And that really made me want to go for it. He used to do things like, if you got straight A's, you'd get $1 for every A, but you'd only get it if you got to the end of the year. And so he taught us that perseverance. And I grew up in the 80s, as some of us might have, and you grew up with things like There's No Crying in Baseball and Tom Petty, I Won't Back Down. And, it was cool to be tough. And so tough was something that came almost natural to me because I was brought up that way, and where I feel like the toughness has served me really well in some ways because I got through a lot of tough times in life. And I also started a business about 20 years ago, wrote a book, stuff like that. But it also got in the way at times. And we probably know that about Steve Jobs and some other famous people that sometimes we get so focused on things, we can forget about what's really important in life. And I had a really good lesson. It was about my daughter, is in the picture there. She was about 13. She and I had just moved because I had gone through a divorce. I was a single mom, was starting my business, and we moved about 2 hours from our hometown. And she was in a new school and stuff. And I was sitting there one day when she came home from school, and I was busy working. We had a small little townhouse, and so I had my desk in the dining room, and I'm sitting there typing, working, and she was telling me something about school, and I kept going, like this, and finally she just got in my face, because she's one of those controller types, and she said, either listen or don't. And I just went, whoa, and I stopped for a minute, and it took me aback because here I had just started a business on helping people to, listen and communicate and be, better working together, and I wasn't even doing it right there in my own home. And so I got up and I said to her, okay, I'm ready now, and she said, well, I'm not. And she walked away, and it was one of those moments that I lost. I lost that moment, and it took a lot of time and a lot of grit to build that back. But it was something that I started to notice that there was a pattern in this. So here I am in the workplaces, and I remembered back to my 15-year career I worked at a typewriter company. That really dates me, in upstate New York. And I remembered back how people were, and then I remembered, now, and it was like, wow, it just seems like people are not connecting the way they used to. It seems like they're so busy going after the goal. They're just race, run. And I don't think it's intentional, but what's happening is because of sometimes our focus just on grit, we leave other people in the dust. Sometimes we even leave our own selves in the dust. And just being able to stop and think about, what does it take to really be gritty? And that's where the acronym GRIT came in. In fact, I told you I loved those Westerns. We were doing this brainstorming in my company, and I had six folks in the room, and we were looking at what could we name this thing that we had that we knew worked with people, that they could get stuff done, but they could get it done in a way that they could connect with each other and not forget about the human side of things. And we were doing what we call, this brainstorming, and we were out in the third pasture, meaning that we were having a few drinks and talking about movies and stuff, and Westerns came up, and all of a sudden, we were in this room that had the painted whiteboard on it. You ever use one of those rooms? And we had words all over the place, and I don't know if it was just in my head, but it just seemed like, grit came out like this, and I went, wow. This is really it. It's grit. It's the tough characters that we need, but it's with the softer characteristics. So we absolutely need grit, but we need to have generosity, respect, integrity, and truth. Because that old command and control kind of style went out a long time ago. And when you think about generosity, respect, integrity, and truth, this is a model that you can use it to lead your life in any area. You can look at it and say, I'm going to use this as a roadmap. You can also use it as kind of a litmus test, or, to kind of check yourself, reflect and see, am I, in truth? Am I in integrity, respect, and generosity? So what we do is, in order to have authentic generosity, we start with truth. And truth is our core. Truth is where it all starts. But before we do that, I want to do a little experiment with you. I'm going to have you do a couple of things. And I'm going to have to interrupt you in the middle, and it might be loud in here, so I'll probably just yell, "Grit!" and then we can all stop and we'll do the second part. But let's do an experiment together. I want you to take 30 seconds and rush around, just get up in just a minute, and rush around without making eye contact, without talking to anybody, and just act like you're so busy you have no time for anyone else, okay? And I want you to do it with full exaggeration. I know it's hard for some of you, so use your best acting, okay? Everybody get up and just run around like, oh, I'm so damn busy, I don't have time for any of this. Oh, yeah, oh, get it done. Get that grit done. All right, grit. We're going to stop there. And now what I want you to do, with full exaggeration, is really warmly greet the people that you meet and look them in the eye. Act like you love them. Give them a hug. Group hug, group hug. Woohoo! All right. You can't sit down till you get a hug. I don't know about you, but I like the energy the second time a lot better. I don't know how many people like the hugs, but how about the eye contact? Didn't get too creepy, did it? Eye contact is really, amazing when we do it right, but sometimes, we do keep that gaze a little bit too long. I heard this funny, I just got to take it aside for a minute. I was at this conference for this really special affair for a client of mine, and it's for an alcoholic beverage company that I work with, and Mrs. Mondavi got up on the stage to do the formal toast, and she was talking about how important it is to raise your glass and make eye contact. And I thought, she's bugging her eyes out a little bit, so she said, because if you don't, you will have 7 years of bad sex. This 92-year-old woman says this in front of this whole group, and we're just like, what? Yeah, so eye contact's important, so the next time you're... So, grit starts with truth. And if we think about our truth, we've got to be realistic and objective and look at where we really are. Who are we? What's important to us? What are our strengths and limitations? When it comes to being the controllers, the interactors, the perfectionists, what is it about us that makes us special, and what is it about us that maybe gets in the way sometimes? And can we be objective and accept what we see when we look in the mirror? This is a tough thing for a lot of people to do, because what happens in life is we lose who we are. We start wearing these masks, and we start being somebody else that somebody else wants us to be. Instead of being that genuine and being comfortable in our skin and being okay with what we see. It doesn't mean that we're not going to want to change maybe sometime, and that's okay. But one of my favorite quotes is, be yourself. Everyone else is already taken. We just got to be real, be ourselves. And it's so fun to see what you've been doing up here today and all the gritty stuff. And I'm sitting back there laughing. I think this is the most fun meeting, seriously, that I've ever been to. I'm like, these guys are who? And I can see the genuineness, and just that authenticity, and it comes through. And when we can, when we really know ourselves in that way and we accept ourselves, it's so much easier to be real in a situation and to have real grit. There's a story that I want to share with you, and maybe some of you have heard this before, but it's don't give it away if you have. It's about this Navy captain who was sailing on this pitch black night. And as he's sailing, he comes head on with the lights with this vessel coming. And so he runs over and dials up on the radio and says, I'm Navy ship, turn 10 degrees east. And he gets a message back saying, no can do, you turn 10 degrees west. And so he's like, geez, he says, I can't believe this. So he goes and dials up and he says, I'm a Navy captain. I demand you turn 10 degrees east. And he got a reply that said, I'm a lighthouse, sir. It's your choice. We have to be really careful sometimes that our ego doesn't get in the way. Because ego is not always a bad thing, is it? Like, ego can help us, but ego can also get in our way at times. It can blind us, and ego is not always about being more than. It's also about feeling less than, too. Sometimes we shy away from things. Sometimes we don't put our full self into things. And it's that nasty 4-letter F word, not the other one, but fear. Fear that gets in our way and stops us from really being who we want to be and who we were born to be. And one of the things that I have found in my own life, in my own practice, with the clients that I work with the executive coaching that I do, is that we've got to learn, a new way to think before we can master a new way to be. Because what we're feeding ourselves is really making us who we are. We spend time on making sure that we're healthy in our bodies and eating right and getting exercise and stuff, but do we really pay attention to the thoughts and the beliefs that we're filling our head with? And most of us picked these up along the way, when we were raised in our families and stuff. And it's amazing when you start stalking yourself and you start, I can't believe I'm thinking that. I can't believe that thought is going in my mind. And that starts to change who we are. And of course, we can change that in any way we want. I call it positive brainwashing. We can say, yeah, I'm the greatest, And we can put stuff in that we want to. And that's where it comes to integrity. So we've got truth. And once we know and accept our truth, and like I said, we can change if we want to. That's our choice. But once we decide that, then we've got to decide, are we going to align to our truth? And that's the action of our truth. So am I in integrity? So if I say that health and fitness and wellness is really important to me, but I go home and, do some Netflix binging and eat Snickers bars and maybe put down some beers and, and sit back, and am I really aligned to that truth? This is for me to figure out. It's easy to go like this and point at somebody else, but it's for me to go, And I'm not here to tell you that you can't change your truth if you don't want to. You can change it. You could even say, well, I like doing this. That's not important to me. You can do that if you want to. Of course, there's always consequences. But integrity is that action of aligning, to our truth. And there's nothing in this world that can trouble us as much as our own thoughts. Did you know that the 15 minutes before you go to sleep at night, whatever you're thinking about, whatever's brewing, whatever you just watched on television, if you had a fight with a significant other or child, or that gets replayed in your brain 15 to 17 times in your subconscious mind. It goes over and over and over again. And so it's implanting in there. No wonder sometimes we wake up exhausted, feeling like crap. So we've got to mindfully think about, what can we put in there so that we're in integrity with ourselves? And do we have the fundamental belief that, we're pretty good just the way we are? And can we feed ourselves more positive things? And you think about what we're doing right here, right now, is the only thing that's going to impact our future. That's it. That's all we have, is what we decide to do in this moment. And I fondly call it stalking myself, but that self-awareness is so important for us to be able to go, all right, what's going on with me right now? What's happening with me? Road rage is a good example of that. We're out driving somewhere and we might get mad at something out there that's happening. And it's like, is that really something that we have control over? And can we look at ourselves and reflect and go, what am I doing right now that might make a difference? And there is always cause and effect. The moment that I lost with my daughter, that was my fault. That was something that took a long, long time to rebuild. I don't know anybody else that's raised teenagers, but I think we deserve a medal for that. It's tough enough as it is, but if we're not there and really present with them, if we're not there and in the moment, that's not only impacting me, but that's impacting the rest of her life. And being present isn't that easy, is it? It's not that hard. It's not that easy today because everything's coming at us. Our minds are usually in one of two places. And no, I'm not talking about the gutter. We're either out in the future or we're in the past. So we're either what have I got to do, and worrying about all of these things that have to happen, or we're back here in the past going, shoulda, woulda, coulda, wish I'd done that, and regretting something. Instead of being right here, right in the moment, the present moment. We can still be working, we can still be moving, we can still be going at a good pace, but we can be present. And there's something really almost magical about that, because people feel better when you're present with them. They're going to want to do more with you. They're going to want to do more for you. So there's some things you can practice to be present in the moment. Does anybody have any right now? Does anybody do any practice for staying present in the moment? Anybody do yoga or meditation? That might not be your thing. You can practice when you're driving. I was just talking about driving. It might be a better way to drive. You can practice just being in the moment. How many of us drive somewhere and we get there and we're like, holy crap, I don't even remember how I got here. It's like, whoa, I was so deep in thought, I wasn't even paying attention. Yeah, it's scary. We're all out there on the road together like this. But if you think about just being in the moment, now, you can multitask, obviously. When you get to a level of you can, do a skill. But if you want to practice being present in the moment, you can do it with an any-day activity like that you've become very habitual with. So you can practice. Where are my hands on the steering wheel? Yeah, you might look a little geeky, but and you might, just practice everything in that way. Brushing your teeth is another good one. Safe to say, most people brush their teeth. So, when you're brushing your teeth, and this isn't a lesson of brushing your teeth, but try to just stay in the moment for that 2 minutes that you're brushing your teeth. It's not easy to do. And I'm not saying you have to, for the quality of brushing your teeth, but if you just try to keep your mind right here in the moment, it's tougher than most people, think about. In fact, what I want you to try right now, I want you to try for 30 seconds to only keep your mind on grit. Just one word, grit, and don't think of anything else for 30 seconds, and I'm going to count. Okay, how many people could do it for 30 seconds? Anybody? Some people can. Good for you. Awesome. It's not easy to do. Anybody want to share where their mind went? Only if it's appropriate. You know, there really is scientific research and proof that the more you practice doing this, the smarter you get, the more focused you get, the better you can persevere, the better you're going to close deals, the better you're going to be able to get grit done. You know, it's a fact. So if we practice that, and you can do it, you know, almost anywhere. So practice that mindfulness. And one of the things about being in integrity, too, that I've found, especially when it comes to the higher up in an organization, but not always, but there is a little correlation that I've seen with this, is that we tend to avoid some things. What are some of the things that we tend to avoid? What do you think it is? Anybody? Conflict. Yes. That sticky, messy, you know, emotional stuff. We don't want to deal with it. You know, and so it's like we'll ignore that kind of stuff. And it's so important that we don't ignore that stuff. We know that if we're in our truth and integrity, it makes it easier to genuinely address these things, to genuinely stop, look somebody in the eye. Hey, what's up, Paul? What's going on? I saw you roll your eyes. Or, you know, I see something's going on. What's happening, Sally? You know, and check in with people. Why don't we do that? Probably a number of reasons, but one of the biggest reasons is we're so damn busy. You know, we're so busy, and we're hoping it's just going to go away, and we don't want to open that can of worms and then have to deal with all the mess that's going to come out. But don't you agree that it's there? It's there, and it's festering, and it's going throughout, you know, parts of the organization, and if we don't address those things, it's going to continue to spread. And quite frankly, we never know what's going on with somebody in their life. You know, we never know when somebody really might need you to stop and say, hey, you know, are you okay? What's going on? You know, what's happening? Because I, for one, can tell you, I've had to deal with some pretty tough situations. And about 2010, I had a brother who took his own life. Horrible. So, like, devastating. But I had to, you know, I took a little time off, but then I had to eat, I had to go back to work, had to put on that tough hat, had to, you know, walk in and just fake it, you know, until I could reconcile that. We never know what people are dealing with. We never know what they have to come in to work with. And the more compassionate, the more, you know, we can connect with people, the more that we can clear some of the roadblocks, the sticky, messy stuff, the better we're gonna be as far as, you know, even productivity, you know, happiness and results. And when I talk about integrity too, it's not about being perfect. You know, it's not about being this unattainable definition of perfection. I see we have a lot of 10s out there. But it's not about, you know, like I'll never be able to meet somebody's expectations kind of thing. Well, quite frankly, I think we're all pretty perfect the way we are. You know, again, we can change it a little bit here and there. We might adjust and adapt. But if we're so busy trying to be absolutely perfect, we're going to miss important things in life. We're going to miss those connections. We're going to miss being able to really, you know, build the trust and build those relationships. And communication, you know, is critical. You think about the definition of communication. It's when two parties reach a shared understanding. That doesn't mean they have to agree, so we have to be able to communicate, you know, and duke things out once in a while and have those really gritty conversations, I call them. But just realizing that a big part of our communication is what? Our nonverbals. What are we putting out there here? What are we saying with our body, our tone, all of that? Has anybody heard of Amy Cuddy? She's got a great TED Talk on this. I highly recommend that you go look at it. It's awesome. And she talks about body language. We all have heard that our body language sends a message. So what I just explained. But what she goes a little deeper with this and says your body language sends a message to you. Hence that Wonder Woman stance, being able to really feel confident and good. How we sit, how we talk, all of that is sending a message inside to our truth, telling us who we are. So we can fake it till we make it. A lot of people think that's crap. I don't, because I've lived it and I've helped other people with it. It doesn't mean you continue to do that, but we're a muscle and we need that exercise. And so if we, work on some of that, in fact, my grandson, my daughter called me up, it was 2-3 years ago. He was 4 at the time, and she couldn't get him in the pool for swimming lessons. Now, the irony was his dad is a search and swim rescue guide for the Navy. And we're thinking, wow. And he's really athletic, Sullivan is. And my daughter's like, I don't know what to do with him. And so she calls me, and I said, well, let me talk to him, because I'm thinking, thoughts and beliefs, man, something's going on in there. And so I just started talking, hey, what's going on, Sully? What's happening? And it came out that he was afraid of drowning because his dad was a search and dive rescue, instructor. And he thought if his dad wasn't there, he would, that was the belief that he had, that he would die. And it was just like, oh my gosh, I would never have thought that. But all I did with him was I said, okay, if I promise that, this one little thing I'm going to have you do will help you want to jump in the pool, will you do it with me? And he was so skeptical. And it was, oh, all right, Nam, rolling his eyes at me. And so I just had him do this and say, I dive, awesome. And that was it. He just did that like 3 times a day. Third day, went to the pool, walked over to the edge, looked at his mom, and just went, bam, right in. I mean, you think about the power of our thoughts and our beliefs and how they drive our actions, and our nonverbals too are a huge part of that, and so being aware of that. And one more thing with integrity too that I love. Have you seen the accountability ladder tool yet? This is a cool tool that if you hang it up in your office, it's not a good one to stick in somebody's face and go, where are you on the accountability ladder? But it's a great self-awareness tool, because can you tell when you're on the bottom rungs of the accountability ladder? How do you know? How do you know when you're on the bottom rungs of the accountability ladder? Because we're all there sometimes, right? Yeah. It's emotions. We're unhappy, we're miserable, we're frustrated. So emotions can be our best trigger for awareness. And it's like, okay, as soon as we start feeling that emotion, instead of lashing out or even withdrawing, it's like hold up the mirror and go, what's going on with me right now? What's happening with me? And make that adjustment. Way back when I first started in my Smith Corona typewriter career days, I remember having this boss she was hardcore. She had the, grit, the traditional sense of grit. And we'd have a meeting, which was better than a lot of the bosses did, once a week. But when I came in there, I felt like it was like dump and run. And she wouldn't stop and really take the time and connect and stuff that I needed, because I'm one of the I styles. And so I remember one day, one of the other bosses said to me, and he said, well, what are you doing about it? And I was like, I can't do anything about it. She's the boss, kind of thing. And it really switched my way of thinking and went, well, yeah, I can own this. This is my experience too. I don't have to sit there and let this happen. And so I started to think differently, and started to go, oh, all right, I can take control of this. Now I'm not going to be able to control the whole thing, but the little couple things that I did, and stop whining, and complaining about it, made a huge difference. And it was way back when, before computers, and we had typewriters, and we'd do inter-office memos, and I'd send her an agenda ahead of time, not really even an agenda. It was like top 3 things that I think would help the department. Everything kind of changed after that, because I wasn't making it all about me. It was more about what was important for that. So how do we get to those upper rungs? It's acknowledging reality. And integrity is about accountability. It's taking ownership, being able to take responsibility for our experiences. Truth and integrity, we're going to get trust. We all probably have been where, we've broken the trust, like I did with my daughter. It took that minute to break that, but it took so long to build it back. It took a long time to get that back. And it's the same thing in the workplace. If we're just not making eye contact, if we're multitasking, if we're, not addressing the important things, those are the kinds of things that are sending the message that people aren't going to trust us. We may never hear it, though, like my loudmouth daughter. We may never get it right in our face. We have to be paying attention to those clues. With trust comes respect. And respect starts here first, right? It's like we've got to be able to respect ourselves. If we know ourselves, accept ourselves, if we're in integrity, we're aligning to that the best we can. It's about doing our best. It's not about being perfect, like I said, but just doing our best. Then we're going to show more respect for ourselves. And you probably all heard, the flight attendant tell you to put the oxygen mask on yourself before the person sitting next to you. Now, if it's nobody I know, I don't really care. But if it's my daughter sitting next to me, I'm like, I would have put it on her first. I would have taken care of her first. And how many of us do this? We take care of everything else. We stay late. We burn ourselves out. We do all this stuff. We become the white knight. And we don't take care of ourselves. And then we wonder, why am I sick? When I was a single mom and taking classes, I was, had to go for those straight A's. My dad had that drilled in my head. I was sick at the end of every semester because I wasn't respecting myself and being true to what was really important. My daughter was the number one important thing. Probably next was my job because I had to eat, and then was my career, but I was putting that ahead of everything. And so when we start to respect ourselves, we start to really understand our truth is, what are we prioritizing and passionate about? What are the actions that we take toward that? And are we respecting ourselves and respecting others? Cute little story about this couple that had retired. I know one of you is here that's retired, and some probably, I talked to somebody else, John D., that might be in a little while retiring, not tomorrow though, right? But this cute little couple there, Sundays down in their breakfast nook, and she says to her husband, gosh, I don't know what's wrong with Mary's laundry. It's dingy. And her husband, of course, is sitting there at the table rolling his eyes like he could care less about the laundry. But, he's learned to humor her and say, oh, I don't know, Mary, I'm not sure what's wrong with the laundry. And a week went by, and the next Sunday, it got worse. And Mary's making all these assumptions, oh my gosh, something's wrong with the neighbor and all this stuff. And the next week she comes down, and it's bright white laundry again. And she's like, oh my gosh, I wonder what happened. And her husband says, I washed the windows. And we don't realize the filters that we're looking through. We don't realize sometimes the perception that we have, and we're so easy, to just look out there. And we got to respect that we don't know somebody else's truth. We don't. We might think we do. We might think we're really good at it. We might be really good at empathy. I even know how you're feeling right now. But we don't, do we? I mean, how many people in here think your parents really knew you? Mine didn't. I like to think that I know my daughter, but I know better. Because we don't, and it's okay. But we just don't want to make the assumption that we know someone else's truth because we know what happens when we make an assumption, right? Like we know it's not, It's a dangerous thing to do. If you think about this most important single ingredient, in the formula of success is knowing how to get along with people, and really looking at how can we authentically be generous, not fake, not, putting the mask on and stuff, but how can we really give and receive? Somebody gives you a compliment, this old dress or that old thing, are we really receiving that fully so that somebody has that experience of giving it? We make a living by what we get, but we make a life by what we give. Sometimes, though, we can give at the expense of ourselves. With grit, generosity, respect, integrity, and truth, you won't give at the expense of yourself. You won't burn yourself out. You'll have abundance rather than scarcity because you're aligning in that way. It's not all about go, 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 rush, rush, rush. And I can see that in here. I can feel it in the room. I was so impressed when I was walking around even before the thing, connecting with people and just really feeling the positive energy in here. You guys really have grit. That's some, good stuff there. And if we just, I love this Jim Carrey little gif here. Stop for a minute. Stop with the multitasking and be able to put the to-do list away even. Of course there's so many things to do. Then we'll have the time and the energy to really be able to pay it forward. And that's where it's going to come back to us. And we've seen it in the customer letters. We've seen it in the way that, you operate as an organization. This pay it forward concept and really listening, I learned a valuable lesson by accident one day on the way to the airport. I was in Brooklyn and I had to take a car to the airport and it took about 2 hours to get there. And I had done a 3-day, leadership workshop and I was exhausted and I was just like laid back in the seat like this and I really didn't want to talk. The driver was from another country. He was speaking with broken English. I was kind of just, nodding, pretending, admittedly, at first. And I even said, I'm kind of tired. But then he said something, and it got my attention. He was struggling with his teenage son with drug and alcohol abuse, and I was having the same issue with my late brother. And that made me perk up. And I started to listen to him, and I was like, wow, oh my God. I couldn't believe the trouble he was having with getting help because he was a foreigner, and just everything that was going on with him. And it was just really close, near and dear to my heart. And so I was just in the moment listening to him the whole way. I mean, I think I said like 1 or 2 words at the most, and that was to encourage him or ask him, to repeat something. And we get to the airport, and we get out, and we get the luggage out of the trunk and stuff, and I go to pay him, and he goes, no money. And I'm like, oh man, we're in New York City. What do you want? I'm like, whoa. But he goes, seriously, best conversation I've ever had. I just sat back and went, wow, I really need to use my grandmother's advice more. 2 ears, 1 mouth, use them in that proportion. As it can be so easy to fill in the blanks and just talk and not really care about what you're saying, but man, those moments of being right there, whether it's with your significant other, with your child, with your customer, with somebody that you work with, that's the way to make the biggest difference. That's the way to really have grit. Because with grit, it's about being, authentic. It's about being real, but it's about, we're still going at that pace and we're still getting that stuff, but we're not leaving other people in the dust. We're able to feel good about ourselves at the end of the day. We're able to accomplish things that we would never be able to accomplish with just the traditional sense of grit. Because let alone leaving other people in the dust, we're also hurting ourselves. So I can see already you guys are really gritty. I think one of the most simple things that we can do is just ask yourself, when you're doing something, am I really being gritty? And even if you just have a split second, maybe it's just that eye contact, not the creepy eye contact, but just that little bit of eye contact, because it'll make a huge difference. We definitely need grit, that toughness, but we need characters like you with generosity, respect, integrity, and truth. I want to thank you all so much. It was such a pleasure to spend some time with you and see some real gritty folks. Thank you. Thank you.